It was just another Monday morning at Darnell & Company, the mid-sized consulting firm that had more cubicles than windows. The fluorescent lights buzzed above, lifeless and harsh, reflecting off the pale, beige walls. Coffee machines gurgled like small boilers of hope and despair. Alex Mercer, a junior analyst, had just been transferred to a new department. The memo was short and mysterious: report to Section 7B immediately. Confidential project. Do not discuss with colleagues. When he arrived, the office was unlike anything he had seen before. The cubicles were rearranged in strange, geometric patterns, as if designed for some ritual rather than productivity. In the center of the floor was a circular table carved from dark stone, not wood, with symbols etched into its surface. Faintly glowing, they pulsed like tiny hearts. Alex shook his head. Must be a new team-building gimmick, he whispered. The manager, Ms. Caro, appeared silently behind him, her heels clicking unnaturally in rhythm with the strange pulse. Welcome, she said, voice eerily calm. You're just in time. We've been waiting for you. Alex glanced around. The other employees didn't look like his colleagues at all. Their faces were pale, eyes unnaturally dark, and their movements synchronized as if guided by a single invisible conductor. Before he could ask a question, the lights flickered. The temperature dropped. The hum of computers and coffee machines warped into a low, almost imperceptible chant. A whisper brushed Alex's mind. We were summoned. You are next. He froze. Every instinct screamed at him to leave, but the office doors slammed shut, trapping him inside. The first day on the new assignment had already become a nightmare. And it was only the beginning. Alex was led down a narrow corridor that seemed longer than it should have been. The walls were a dull gray, lined with old office plaques, but something about them felt wrong. Shadows clung to corners, stretching unnaturally. The faint pulse from Section 7B followed him, like a heartbeat embedded in the floor itself. At the end of the corridor, Ms. Caro stopped in front of a door painted black. No label. No number. Just a cold, polished surface that reflected nothing, not light, not Alex's face, not even the fluorescent bulbs above. This is your workspace, she said softly, almost reverently. No windows. No distractions. Focus is essential. Alex hesitated. No windows? Why? She cut him off with a sharp look. Some things are best kept from the outside world. You'll understand soon enough. The moment he stepped inside, the door clicked shut behind him. The room was smaller than a cubicle but impossibly deep, its ceiling lost in darkness. The walls were covered in strange symbols that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something older, metallic, like blood centuries dry. On the desk, a single folder waited. Its cover bore an unrecognizable glyph that pulsed faintly in sync with the room itself. The pulse was slower than the one from the office floor but no less insistent, like a heartbeat trying to seep into his own chest. Alex opened the folder. Inside were documents filled with names, dates, and obscure rituals. Scribbled at the bottom of every page in the same dark ink was a single phrase. The old ones awaken through the willing and the foolish. As he read, the room seemed to shrink. The walls pressed closer. The symbols along the walls began to glow faintly, a sickly red that reminded him of veins. The temperature dropped, and a low whispering filled the air, so soft he could barely hear it. We see you, we hear you, you belong to us. Alex tried to leave. The door wouldn't budge. The pulse in the room synced with his heartbeat. Every breath he took echoed unnaturally loud, matching the rhythm. He realized then, this was no ordinary office. This room was alive. And it had been waiting for him. Alex didn't sleep that night. Not that he could. The room with no windows felt alive, the pulse in the walls had embedded itself in his chest, and whispers curled around the edges of his mind, promising things he couldn't comprehend. At exactly midnight, the office intercom crackled. A distorted voice, impossibly deep yet faint, filled the entire floor. All Section 7B employees, report immediately for the mandatory meeting. Alex's stomach turned. Mandatory midnight meetings were unheard of at Darnell & Company, and certainly not part of any normal corporate schedule. Grabbing his folder, he followed the faint red glow that led down the corridor. The rest of the office was silent. No computers, no printers, no hum of fluorescent lights, just shadows moving unnaturally along the walls. In the center of the office floor, the employees had gathered. They weren't talking. They weren't blinking. Their eyes glowed faintly gold, reflecting the pulse of the strange symbols etched into the floor. At the center, Ms. Caro stood silently beside the black stone table, her expression unreadable, almost reverent. "Tonight," she said softly, "we witness the awakening. Attendance is not optional." Alex's hands shook. The folder in his arms seemed to grow heavier with every step. On the table, the symbols glowed brighter, pulsating in rhythm with the strange whispers that now filled the room, wrapping around every mind, every thought, every heartbeat. The meeting began. But there were no presentations, no charts, no memos. Instead, Ms. Caro raised her hands, and the room fell into a deep, unnatural silence. A low rumble shook the floor. The walls throbbed. From the symbols on the table, faint shapes began to rise, shadowy figures, humanoid yet impossible, flickering in and out of existence. Whispers became voices, chanting in an ancient language older than any living employee, older than the city itself. The gold glint in the employee's eyes intensified. Alex's mind screamed for him to run, but his body refused. Every instinct, every muscle, every thought was tethered to the pulse, the rhythm, the chant. And then the whispers formed a single, dreadful phrase inside his head. "The old ones demand obedience, or the willing will be claimed." The midnight meeting had begun. And for Alex, the office was no longer a workplace. It was a temple. The midnight meeting had lasted hours, though it felt like days. The chanting had grown louder, more insistent, and Alex's head throbbed with the rhythm of the pulse beneath the office floor. He tried to focus on the symbols on the black stone table, but they seemed to shift when he blinked, moving like living veins, glowing brighter with every chant. Then Ms. Caro spoke. Her voice cut through the whispers like a blade. "The old ones are pleased. But they demand more, they demand proof of devotion." Alex froze. A cold dread seeped into his bones. He glanced around the table. One of his coworkers, Mark, a cheerful man who had always joked about overtime, was now pale and trembling. The whispers seemed to surround him, pulling at his very essence. "Mark," Ms. Caro said softly, almost lovingly, "will be the first." The floor beneath Mark's chair split with a low, grinding sound. Black veins surged from the cracks, wrapping around him like living chains. He screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the pulse, replaced by the chanting. The veins lifted him slowly, pulling him toward the glowing symbols on the table. Alex wanted to run, wanted to stop it. But his legs were frozen, every step synchronized to the pulse, every breath dictated by the office itself. The black veins pulled Mark over the table. As he hovered above the glowing symbols, the light intensified, bathing the room in deep red. His scream faltered, replaced by a low, unnatural hum that echoed in the minds of everyone present. The air thickened, and a shadow emerged from the center of the symbols, a figure vast and terrible, impossible in its form. Golden eyes burned from its face, and tendrils of darkness extended from its body, intertwining with the veins that held Mark aloft. And then the first sacrifice was complete. Mark's body dissolved into black smoke, sucked into the heart of the symbols, leaving only a faint red glow where he had hung. The chanting stopped abruptly. The room was silent, except for the residual pulse echoing in Alex's chest. Ms. Caro turned to him, her eyes gleaming gold. "Now you understand. This is no ordinary office. We serve the old ones. We feed them. And soon, you will be next." Alex's stomach churned. Fear, disbelief, and the undeniable reality of what he had witnessed crashed over him. He had crossed a line from which there was no return. The office wasn't just alive. It was hungry. And it wanted him. After the first sacrifice, the office never felt normal again. The fluorescent lights flickered erratically, shadows crawled along the walls, and the pulse from the black stone table seemed to echo in every corner. Even the air felt thick, heavy with an ancient presence. Alex tried to make sense of it all, but the folders he had been handed contained more than client reports. They were filled with ancient symbols, writings in a language older than time, and diagrams of rituals that stretched across centuries. The pages seemed to shift when he blinked, forming new phrases he couldn't remember reading before. At exactly 3:33 a.m., Ms. Caro summoned him to the black stone table. The office floor was empty, save for the red glow emanating from the etched symbols. "It's time you understand," she said. "You are not merely an employee. You are part of the contract." She handed him a thick parchment sealed with black wax, stamped with the same symbol as the table. "Sign this," she said, "or be unmade." Alex hesitated. His heart raced. The whispers had returned, stronger now, curling into his ears and sinking into his mind. "Sign, serve, obey, belong to us." He looked at the contract. It was more than ink and paper. The letters moved subtly, shifting and rearranging themselves into shapes that made his stomach churn. As he stared, he realized the parchment was alive. Veins of black and red slithered across it like tiny living things, pulsating in rhythm with the office and the god it served. Ms. Caro smiled. Every employee, every willing servant, is bound by this contract. It is old, older than the company, older than the building, older than any living soul you know. Once signed, the old ones will accept you. Refuse, and the office will decide your fate. The whispers grew louder. Alex's fingers trembled as he reached for a pen. The moment the ink touched the parchment, a jolt shot through him. His vision blurred. Symbols from the table etched themselves into his skin, glowing faintly gold, and the pulse of the office became his heartbeat. He felt it immediately, the connection. The old ones were inside him now, intertwined with his mind, his thoughts, his fears, his very soul. Ms. Caro stepped back. The black stone table pulsed brighter than ever. "Welcome," she said. "You are ours now." Alex knew there was no turning back. He had become part of something ancient, something hungry, something that had waited centuries for willing hands to serve it. The office wasn't just a workplace anymore. It was a temple, and he had signed its first human contract. And the old ones were patient. But patient does not mean forgiving. The morning after Alex signed the contract, the office was empty. Not literally. The lights flickered, computers hummed, and the faint pulse of the black stone table still echoed through the halls. But the employees were nowhere to be seen. And yet, the work was being done. Chairs rocked slightly, papers shuffled, keyboards clacked as if pressed by invisible hands. Shadows moved across the walls, independent of any human source. They were thin, elongated, writhing forms that slithered across desks, folding and bending in impossible ways. Alex walked cautiously down the corridor. Every instinct screamed at him to leave, but the pull of the contract, the pulse of the old ones, kept him tethered to the office floor. From the corner of his eye, he saw them, shadowy figures, shaped vaguely like his coworkers, performing their tasks with eerie precision. Their faces were blank voids, except for faint, glowing golden eyes. They didn't speak. They didn't breathe. They simply worked, as if driven by a force older than the building itself. Alex approached a desk. A shadow mimicked the movements of a human, typing and filing documents. When he reached for it, the shadow recoiled, tendrils of black energy brushing against his hand, sending a jolt through his body. Then the whispers returned, louder than ever, threading through the very walls. The old ones require obedience, even in absence, even without flesh. Alex realized the terrifying truth: the office no longer needed people to function. The old one's influence was complete. Shadows alone could maintain the company's operations, enforcing the rules, performing the rituals, and expanding the reach of the contract. And with every passing hour, the shadows grew bolder. They began to move outside the office floor, stretching into hallways, stairwells, even down into the building's basement, where the air thickened with ancient energy. Alex backed away, heart racing. The office wasn't just alive. It was self-sustaining. And it was learning. He glanced at the black stone table. Its pulse had doubled, thrumming through the walls and into his chest. The shadows on the wall seemed to bow subtly toward it, as if acknowledging the heart of the old ones beneath the building. Alex understood then: the office had become a hive. A living, breathing temple of shadows, devoted entirely to powers beyond comprehension. And he was trapped inside it. By the seventh day, the office had transformed completely. Cubicles had twisted into impossible angles, walls stretched and shifted, and the pulse of the black stone table now resonated through every corner of the building. Even the elevators seemed to hum with a low, ancient rhythm, as if guiding Alex and the other employees toward something inevitable. Ms. Caro appeared suddenly in the hallway, her golden eyes glowing brighter than ever. "It is time," she said softly. "Time to descend into the heart of what you serve." Alex followed her down a narrow stairwell he had never noticed before, one that spiraled downward endlessly. The air grew thicker, hotter, and smelled faintly of ozone and iron. Shadows darted along the walls, whispering unintelligible words that seemed to echo inside his skull. At the bottom, the stairwell opened into a vast, circular chamber, the heart of the office. It was enormous. The black stone table had grown into a massive altar, surrounded by pulsating red veins that extended into every wall, ceiling, and floor surface. The walls themselves seemed alive, writhing with symbols that glowed faintly gold, echoing the signs Alex had seen in the contract and the midnight meeting. Shadows moved along the veins, forming humanoid figures that bowed toward the altar, their movements synchronized in eerie perfection. And at the center, the pulse was strongest, a black, throbbing mass that seemed to breathe, almost like a heart, except it was alive. Ms. Caro motioned for Alex to approach. "This is the core," she whispered. "The old ones reside here. To serve fully, you must touch it, understand it, become part of it." As he stepped closer, the black mass responded. Veins surged outward, wrapping around his feet, climbing his legs, and connecting him to the altar. His heartbeat synced with the pulse. The whispers became a roar inside his mind. "You belong. All belong. Serve or be unmade." The air grew heavy, oppressive. Shadows moved faster, their golden eyes glowing like twin suns. Alex felt reality bend around him, walls stretched, floors twisted, the ceiling vanished into darkness. Time itself seemed to slow, distorted by the living pulse beneath him. And then the first whispers solidified into shapes, ancient, impossible forms of gods, looming in the darkness, their golden eyes fixed on him, their presence so vast it crushed the edges of his mind. Alex realized the horrifying truth: the office was no longer just a building. It was a gateway, a conduit to powers older than the earth itself. And now, he was descending directly into its heart. There was no turning back. Alex's chest burned as the pulse from the black stone altar surged through him. The shadows, now countless, writhed along the walls and floor, converging toward the center of the chamber. The golden-eyed shapes of former employees merged with the darkness, forming impossible angles and monstrous limbs that defied every natural law. The altar itself began to crack. From its fissures poured a black, viscous energy, glowing faintly red at its edges, filling the chamber with a heat that burned skin and sanity alike. The pulse doubled in intensity, echoing in Alex's skull, syncing his heartbeat with something immense, ancient, and hungry. Then, from the depths of the altar, it emerged. The old god. Its form was colossal, far larger than the building itself. Limbs stretched at impossible angles, skin like molten stone, eyes like golden suns, and a presence that crushed the edges of reality. Shadows that had once been employees writhed around its body, merging into a single horrifying mass of devotion and worship. Alex felt the entity's awareness brush against his mind. It was not just alive, it was conscious, patient, eternal, and terrifying. Thoughts not his own infiltrated him. "You called me. You fed me. Now all is mine." The floor beneath him quaked as the old god stretched upward. Its voice, not heard but felt, resonated in every cell of his body. "Serve or be unmade. All flesh is temporary. All shadows are eternal." The shadows along the walls became limbs, reaching for Alex, for the pulse, for the altar itself. They dragged themselves across the floor, coiling around each other, forming bridges and barriers, reshaping the office into a cathedral for something inhuman, unstoppable, and ancient. Alex realized, with a terror that froze every thought, the old god wasn't just in the office. It was the office. Every wall, every cubicle, every pulse, every shadow, it was all a part of the god. And it had finally risen. The whispers returned, louder, merging into one deafening roar. "All who enter become part of me. All who resist are consumed." Alex stumbled backward. The floor beneath him cracked. Shadows surged. The black stone altar throbbed, glowing brighter than ever. The old god was awake. And the office, its body. And there was no escape. The office no longer resembled a workplace. Cubicles had fused with walls, floors twisted into impossible angles, and the black stone altar, now a pulsating core of living darkness, dominated the space. Shadows moved like rivers, filling every corner, every ceiling, every corridor. Alex staggered through the chaos, his heart pounding in sync with the old god's pulse. The whispers had become deafening, a chorus of demands, hunger, and malice. His mind threatened to shatter under the weight of the collective consciousness of the old ones. From the central chamber, Ms. Caro appeared, no longer fully human. Her body shimmered with black veins, her golden eyes brighter than ever. "The company is finished," she said, voice echoing unnaturally through the twisted walls. "The old ones consume all. Only obedience remains." The ceiling collapsed. Beams twisted like living limbs, cracking the walls and sending shards of glass and stone flying. Computers exploded in sparks and flames. The glow from the altar expanded, filling every room, every office, every shadow with red light. The employees who had once been human now existed as pure shadows, moving in unison, forming a massive, writhing mass that surrounded Alex. He could see fragments of his coworkers' faces within the darkness, screaming silently, eyes glowing gold. The old god's presence filled the building. Every wall, every floor, every desk was part of its body, its mind, its will. The pulse in the altar synced with Alex's heartbeat, and he realized resistance was impossible. A final whisper curled inside his skull. "You are ours. All who dwell here belong to us." The company collapses, but eternity rises. The building shuddered violently. Floors sank into shadow, walls split like living flesh, and the city outside felt the tremor. The company, once a symbol of productivity and ambition, was no more. Its existence had been consumed and transformed into a temple for the old ones. Alex's vision blurred. The shadows coiled around him, pulling him toward the altar. In the final moment, he understood the truth. The office had never been just a building. It had been a vessel, a gateway, and now, it had fully awakened. The pulse slowed for a moment, almost contemplative, before surging again, reshaping reality around it. The company had collapsed. The employees were gone. And the old god reigned, patient, eternal, and unstoppable. Outside, the city carried on, unaware. But within the walls of Darnell and Company, time and space had become meaningless. The office existed only as a vessel for ancient hunger. Alex became part of it. And soon, the shadows would reach beyond the office, spreading the influence of the old ones into the world. The collapse was complete. But the hunger had only begun.